I'm going to teach them that actions have consequences. Those were the words Marcus Washington spoke to his daughter Zara after she called him in tears from a cramped middle seat in economy class, a seat she never should have been in. Just minutes earlier, Zara Washington had been escorted off first class by a white flight attendant who questioned her right to be there, despite her valid boarding pass. The humiliation burned through her as other passengers stared. What the flight crew didn't know: her father wasn't just any angry parent. Marcus Washington was a tech billionaire who secretly owned nearly a third of the entire airline. And within 24 hours, that airline would be brought to its knees. Welcome back to the channel. Today's story isn't just about racism in the skies, it's about power, justice, and what happens when the wrong person is discriminated against. Have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you? Where they judged you based on your appearance rather than your worth? Drop a comment below with your location and let me know if this has happened to you. The morning had started like any other for 22-year-old Zara Washington. As the daughter of one of America's wealthiest black entrepreneurs, she was flying first class to Los Angeles to finalize her Stanford MBA thesis. A routine trip that would change the aviation industry forever. "Excuse me, miss. I need to see your boarding pass." The flight attendant's voice was cold, her smile forced. Around Zara, white passengers settled into their first-class seats without scrutiny. None of them had been asked to show their boarding passes a second time. "I'm sorry?" Zara replied, confused. "Your boarding pass," the attendant repeated, sharper now. "There seems to be some confusion about your seat assignment." Zara handed over her phone, displaying her mobile boarding pass. The flight attendant, Patricia Kellerman, studied it with exaggerated care. "This seat was supposed to be for a Mr. Washington." "I am a Washington," Zara replied evenly. "Zara Washington." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "The reservation shows Marcus Washington." "That's my father. He couldn't make the trip, so I'm using his ticket." The airline confirmed the name change yesterday. But Patricia wasn't listening. Within minutes, Zara found herself being marched off the plane like a criminal, humiliated in front of dozens of staring passengers. What Patricia and the gate agent didn't realize was that they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. Because when Zara called her father from that middle seat in economy, she set in motion a chain of events that would expose decades of discrimination, topple executives, and transform an entire corporation. If you're new here, hit subscribe now because this story takes a turn that nobody, especially not Pinnacle Airlines, saw coming. By the time this flight landed, Marcus Washington would reveal a secret he'd kept for 2 years. His systematic acquisition of Pinnacle Airlines stock, making him the company's largest shareholder. The same company that had just humiliated his daughter was about to learn a lesson in consequences that would cost them $500 million and their entire executive team. Stay with me, this story is just taking off. To understand the magnitude of what happened that day, you need to know who Zara Washington really was. Zara wasn't just another first-class passenger. She was the daughter of Marcus Washington, founder of Washington Dynamics and one of the most powerful black entrepreneurs in America. A man who had transformed a small software startup into a multi-billion-dollar tech empire that revolutionized cloud computing. The Washington name commanded respect in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Their family foundation donated millions to racial justice causes. Their influence stretched across industries, politics, and culture. But wealth and status offer no protection against racism. Marcus Washington knew this truth all too well. He'd faced discrimination throughout his journey to the top. He had hoped his success would shield his children from similar experiences. He was wrong. That morning at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Zara adjusted her Hermes scarf and checked her phone one final time before boarding. Her Stanford MBA thesis presentation was nearly complete. This quick trip to Los Angeles was meant to finalize the details with her advisors. If you're watching this right now and you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, drop a like on this video. The algorithm needs to know this story matters. Zara boarded Pinnacle Airlines flagship Boeing 777 with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Her designer luggage trailed behind as she made her way to seat 2A. The first-class cabin gleamed with luxury, lie-flat seats, premium amenities, attentive service. At least that was the promise. She settled into her seat and pulled out her MacBook. Around her, other first-class passengers, all white, were already being served pre-departure champagne. A businessman in 1A sipped his drink while chatting with a flight attendant. An elderly woman across the aisle was offered a warm towel. No one questioned their right to be there. Then came Patricia Kellerman's voice. "Excuse me, miss. I need to see your boarding pass." The request was unusual. Zara had already shown her boarding pass at the gate and to the flight attendant at the aircraft door. Why was she being singled out? The interaction that followed revealed the ugly truth. Despite Zara's polite explanations, despite the confirmation emails showing the ticket transfer had been approved, Patricia had already decided something wasn't right. What wasn't right in Patricia's mind was a young black woman in seat 2A. "I'll need to verify this with the gate agent," Patricia announced loudly, drawing stares from nearby passengers. "Please gather your belongings and follow me." In that moment, Zara recognized the familiar pattern her father had warned her about, the way some people questioned her right to occupy spaces they deemed inappropriate for someone who looked like her. Have you ever felt that sensation? When someone looks at you like you don't belong. Comment below if you know exactly what I'm talking about. As Zara gathered her things, she noticed something that made her blood boil. Not a single other passenger was being asked to verify their seat assignment. The white businessman who had boarded after her was now enjoying his second glass of champagne. The flight attendant had never asked to see his boarding pass again. The walk down the jet bridge felt endless. Zara could feel the eyes of other passengers boring into her back as Patricia marched her off the aircraft. The gate area was bustling with travelers, and several turned to watch the spectacle of a young black woman being escorted away from a first-class cabin. At the gate desk, Patricia spoke in hushed tones with Agent Kevin Morrison, a thin man with nervous eyes who kept glancing at Zara as if she might bolt at any moment. Their whispered conversation made it clear, they had already decided she didn't belong. After several minutes of phone calls and theatrical verification, Morrison approached with an expression that pretended to be apologetic. "Ms. Washington, I'm afraid there's been an irregularity with your ticket transfer. We'll need to reseat you in coach while we sort this out." Irregularity. The word hung in the air, a paper-thin disguise for what was really happening. What would you do in this situation? Would you accept being moved to coach? Or would you stand your ground? Think about it, because what Zara did next changed everything. Irregularity? I have confirmation emails showing the name change was approved. My father is Marcus Washington of Washington Dynamics. One phone call will verify everything. Zara's composure finally cracked. The injustice was too blatant, too raw to maintain her usual poise. But her protests fell on deaf ears. "Ma'am, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," Morrison said, his face flushing. "We have other passengers to consider." Those other passengers were already boarding, streaming past the confrontation at the gate desk. Some slowed to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort to, in a few cases, smug satisfaction. "What you need to consider," Zara said, her voice rising, "is that you're about to make the biggest mistake of your career." But Morrison and Kellerman had made their decision. Within minutes, Zara found herself being escorted down the aisle of the main cabin, past rows of curious eyes, to a middle seat in row 32. If you've ever been humiliated in public, you know the feeling. That burning sensation in your chest. The prickling behind your eyes. The struggle to maintain dignity when others are working to strip it away. Let me know in the comments if you've experienced something similar. Your story matters here. Row 32, middle seat. Zara was squeezed between a crying baby and a man whose cologne was overwhelming. Her designer luggage had been gate-checked against her will. Her laptop was trapped in an overhead bin 3 rows ahead. The humiliation was complete. As the aircraft doors closed and the safety demonstration began, Zara felt something she rarely experienced: powerlessness. Despite her family's wealth and status, despite her own accomplishments as a Stanford MBA candidate, despite having done nothing wrong, she had been judged solely on her appearance and found wanting. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering pre-departure beverages to first-class passengers while ignoring the discomfort in economy. Patricia Kellerman didn't glance back once at the young woman she had displaced. For Zara, this moment crystallized everything her father had tried to prepare her for. Marcus Washington had built an empire, but he never pretended that success erased racism. "Money doesn't make you white," he would tell her. "It just changes how they discriminate." Now she understood exactly what he meant. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Zara pulled out her phone and did something she had never done before. She called her father for help. The call connected just before the flight attendants began their final compliance check. "Dad, they kicked me out of first class." Zara's voice was tight with anger and embarrassment. "They're claiming there was an irregularity with the ticket transfer, but we both know what this is really about." Around her, passengers pretended not to listen, but their sideways glances betrayed their interest. The man with the overpowering cologne shifted uncomfortably. The mother with the crying baby looked sympathetic. Which airline? Marcus asked, his voice deadly calm. Pinnacle Airlines Flight 847. I want you to document everything, Marcus instructed. Take photos, record conversations if you can. And don't let them intimidate you. Zara lowered her voice. Dad, what are you going to do? The answer would send shockwaves through the entire aviation industry. I'm going to teach them that actions have consequences. If you're still watching, you're about to see how one phone call transformed a moment of discrimination into a corporate earthquake. Hit that like button if you believe in accountability. As Flight 847 climbed to cruising altitude, Zara began documenting everything. She wrote detailed notes about Patricia Kellerman and Kevin Morrison. She recorded a video statement on her phone, time-stamped and geotagged. She even asked the sympathetic mother next to her if she would be willing to provide a witness statement. Meanwhile, 35,000 feet below, Marcus Washington was setting in motion a plan that would bring an entire airline to its knees. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to have the power to hold corporations accountable for discrimination? To have the resources to fight back when others would have to accept defeat? For most of us, justice remains elusive when we face discrimination. We might file a complaint that goes nowhere. We might share our story on social media and hope for a response. We might simply swallow the hurt and move on. But Marcus Washington wasn't most people. And Pinnacle Airlines was about to learn exactly what that meant. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Flight attendants began the beverage service, starting with the first-class cabin where Zara should have been sitting. In economy, she waited, documenting every interaction, every slight, building a case that would soon be at the center of national attention. What happened next would transform not just one airline, but an entire industry's approach to racial discrimination. Marcus Washington was in his corner office on the 42nd floor of Washington Tower when his daughter's call came through. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of downtown Atlanta, a city where his family's name adorned buildings, scholarships, and charitable foundations. But none of that mattered now. His daughter had been humiliated, and the rage he felt was primal. As one of the most powerful black executives in America, Marcus had faced his share of discrimination over the decades. Banks that refused to loan money to his startup. Venture capitalists who dismissed his ideas. Country clubs that found creative excuses to reject his membership applications. He had hoped his wealth and influence would shield his children from such experiences. That hope had just been shattered at 35,000 feet. Marcus swiveled his chair toward his computer, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. Washington Dynamics had extensive contracts with Pinnacle Airlines, corporate travel agreements worth over $50 million annually. His company's employees flew Pinnacle exclusively for business travel. But there was something else. Something Pinnacle's executives didn't know. For the past 2 years, Marcus had been quietly acquiring Pinnacle Airlines stock through various shell companies and investment funds. What had started as a routine diversification strategy had evolved into something more targeted as he noticed troubling patterns in how the airline treated minority passengers. Now, Washington Dynamics controlled nearly 30% of the airline's outstanding shares, just shy of the threshold that would require public disclosure. One more purchase would push him over that threshold. One more purchase would reveal him as the company's largest shareholder. One more purchase would give him the power to tear down Pinnacle's entire leadership structure. If you believe in karma, drop a comment right now. I want to know if you're feeling what I'm feeling about what's coming next. Marcus reached for his secure phone, the one connected directly to his team of lawyers, investigators, and crisis management specialists. These were the people he called when normal channels wouldn't suffice. When problems required extraordinary solutions. I need everything we have on Pinnacle Airlines, he told his chief of staff. Board members, executive compensation, discrimination complaints, settlement history. Everything. And I need it within the hour. Next, he called his investment team. Execute Plan Omega on Pinnacle Airlines. All of it. Now. Plan Omega was the code name for the final phase of stock acquisition. The purchase that would push Washington Dynamics over the disclosure threshold and reveal Marcus as Pinnacle's largest shareholder. The stock purchase would be timed perfectly to coincide with what came next. His third call was to his head of legal affairs. Janet, my daughter Zara has just been discriminated against on Pinnacle Airlines Flight 847. I want a team of civil rights attorneys meeting her plane when it lands in Los Angeles. And I want the DOJ Civil Rights Division notified. With each call, Marcus's plan took shape. This wouldn't be a simple complaint or a demand for compensation. This would be a complete dismantling of a corporate culture that enabled racism. Have you ever wanted to fight back against injustice but lacked the resources? Have you ever wished you had the power to hold powerful people accountable? If you have, hit that subscribe button right now because what Marcus Washington did next is exactly what many of us dream about. While Flight 847 cruised toward Los Angeles, Marcus's team assembled in the Crisis Management Center on the 41st floor of Washington Tower. The room hummed with purposeful energy as investigators, lawyers, and communications specialists prepared for battle. On massive screens around the room, information about Pinnacle Airlines appeared in real time. Stock prices, executive profiles, internal documents obtained through Marcus's network of contacts throughout the industry. "Sir, we've found something," said one of the investigators, sliding a tablet across the conference table. "Patricia Kellerman has been the subject of 3 previous discrimination complaints in the past 5 years, all involving passengers of color, all dismissed by Pinnacle's Human Resources Department." Marcus nodded grimly. "And the gate agent?" "Kevin Morrison. Employed by Pinnacle for 18 months. Already involved in several incidents where black passengers were removed from flights under questionable circumstances. In each case, the airline quietly settled out of court. The pattern was clear. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was systematic." "There's more," the investigator continued. "We've identified a whistleblower within Pinnacle's HR department who's willing to provide documentation showing the airline has been systematically covering up discrimination complaints for years." Marcus stood at the head of the table, surveying the team he had assembled. These were people who understood what was at stake, not just for Zara but for every passenger who had ever been profiled, humiliated, or discriminated against. "Today," he said, his voice resonating with quiet determination, "we're going to change the airline industry forever." While Flight 847 continued its journey westward, Marcus Washington's team operated with military precision. Within an hour, they had compiled comprehensive dossiers on Patricia Kellerman and Kevin Morrison, including their employment histories, social media profiles, and previous complaints filed against them. What they discovered was more disturbing than even Marcus had anticipated. Patricia Kellerman's social media accounts, which she apparently thought were private, contained a disturbing pattern of racist posts and conspiracy theories. Screenshots were taken, archived, and added to the growing evidence file. Kevin Morrison's record was equally troubling. Despite being employed by Pinnacle for only 18 months, he had already been involved in several incidents where black passengers were removed from flights under questionable circumstances. But the investigation didn't stop with individual employees. Marcus's team was digging deeper, following the trail of discrimination to its source. If you believe that racism is often systemic rather than just individual, type "systemic" in the comments. Let's see how many of us understand this truth. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A mid-level manager in Pinnacle's Human Resources Department had been documenting the company's handling of discrimination complaints for years, troubled by what she saw as a pattern of dismissal and cover-up. Now, she was ready to come forward with evidence that would blow the case wide open. Internal emails, training materials, settlement records, all pointing to a corporate culture that not only tolerated racial profiling but had developed sophisticated methods to shield itself from legal consequences. "Look at this," said Janet Chin, Marcus's head of legal affairs, pointing to a document on her screen. "They have a coded system for flagging high-risk passengers during the boarding process. The criteria are thinly veiled proxies for race." Marcus leaned in, studying the document. "Can we prove this system was used against Zara?" "We already have," replied one of the investigators. "We've obtained the boarding manifest for Flight 847. Zara's name was flagged with code HR7, their designation for passengers who don't match profile expectations for premium cabins." The evidence was damning. Pinnacle Airlines hadn't just discriminated against Zara Washington. They had institutionalized discrimination as company policy. We've all heard the phrase, "the system is rigged," but rarely do we get to see exactly how it's rigged. This is your chance to understand how discrimination becomes policy, how racism gets embedded in corporate structures. As the investigation expanded, Marcus's team discovered something even more explosive. Pinnacle Airlines had been systematically covering up discrimination complaints for years, using confidential settlements and non-disclosure agreements to silence victims. The airline's own internal documents revealed a corporate culture that not only tolerated racial profiling but incentivized it through performance metrics that rewarded gate agents and flight attendants for identifying security concerns, a euphemism for targeting minority passengers. "They've settled 27 discrimination cases in the past 3 years," Janet reported. "All with NDAs. all buried in accounting as customer service resolutions to avoid scrutiny from regulators or shareholders. Marcus nodded grimly. And the board? What did they know? Everything, Janet replied. We have quarterly reports sent directly to the board's risk management committee detailing these settlements. They knew exactly what was happening and chose to hide it rather than address it. The picture was becoming clear. This wasn't just about Patricia Kellerman or Kevin Morrison. This wasn't even just about Pinnacle's executive team. This was about an entire corporate structure built to enable discrimination while shielding itself from consequences. For Marcus Washington, this confirmed what he had suspected when he began acquiring Pinnacle stock 2 years earlier. The company needed more than a policy change or sensitivity training. It needed to be transformed from the inside out. And now, he had both the evidence and the leverage to make that transformation happen. As Flight 847 began its descent into Los Angeles, Marcus Washington was putting the finishing touches on a plan that would send shockwaves through the aviation industry and beyond. The trap was set. All he needed now was for Pinnacle's executives to make the mistake he was counting on. Marcus Washington's first call was to Congresswoman Alicia Rodriguez, chair of the House Subcommittee on Aviation. For years, she had been pushing for stronger anti-discrimination enforcement in the airline industry, often facing resistance from powerful corporate interests. Congresswoman, I have evidence of systematic racial discrimination at Pinnacle Airlines that goes all the way to the top, Marcus said. I'm prepared to testify before your subcommittee and provide documentation that will make previous airline scandals look minor by comparison. His second call was to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Marcus had cultivated relationships throughout the federal government during his years as a prominent black business leader, and those connections were about to pay dividends. His third call was to the media. Within hours, reporters from major news outlets were working on stories about Pinnacle Airlines' discrimination problem. But Marcus held back the most explosive revelation, his ownership stake in the company. The trap was set. Now he waited for Pinnacle to take the bait. If you're still with me, you're about to witness a masterclass in corporate accountability. Hit that like button if you're ready for justice to be served. Pinnacle Airlines CEO Richard Blackstone was enjoying a round of golf at his exclusive country club when his phone began buzzing with urgent calls from his communications team. By the time he reached the clubhouse, the story was already breaking on social media. Videos of Zara Washington being escorted off the aircraft had gone viral, accompanied by the hashtag Pinnacle discrimination. The daughter of a prominent black billionaire humiliated and forced into economy class despite having a valid first-class ticket. The optics were devastating. Blackstone's first instinct was damage control. He authorized the standard corporate response, a carefully worded statement expressing concern about the incident and promising a thorough investigation. Patricia Kellerman and Kevin Morrison were placed on administrative leave, and the airline's crisis management team began crafting talking points for media interviews. But Blackstone made a critical error. Instead of reaching out to Marcus Washington directly to apologize and seek a resolution, he decided to fight. In a conference call with his legal team, he dismissed the incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding and authorized his lawyers to prepare a vigorous defense against any potential lawsuit. We're not going to be extorted by some rich guy playing the race card, Blackstone told his executives. We followed our procedures, and if the Washingtons don't like it, they can take their business elsewhere. It was exactly the response Marcus had been hoping for. What would you do if you were in Marcus's position right now? Would you go public immediately? Or would you wait for the perfect moment to spring the trap? Comment below with what your next move would be. While Blackstone and his team prepared their defense, Marcus Washington was preparing his attack. The final pieces were falling into place. His investment team confirmed that Plan Omega had been executed successfully. Washington Dynamics now officially controlled 31% of Pinnacle Airlines' outstanding stock, making them the company's largest shareholder. His legal team had compiled a devastating case file documenting years of discriminatory practices at Pinnacle, supported by internal documents and whistleblower testimony. His media contacts were primed and ready to break the full story at his signal. And most importantly, Pinnacle's CEO had just provided the perfect soundbite, some rich guy playing the race card, that would come back to haunt him. As Zara's flight touched down in Los Angeles, a team of civil rights attorneys was waiting to meet her at the gate. They escorted her to a private lounge where she provided a detailed statement about her experience. Meanwhile, Marcus Washington called a press conference for the following morning at his company's headquarters. The assembled reporters expected a typical discrimination lawsuit announcement: angry victim, sympathetic lawyers, demands for monetary damages. What they got instead was a masterclass in corporate warfare. The stage was set for a revelation that would transform not just one airline, but an entire industry's approach to racial discrimination. And it all hinged on a secret that Marcus Washington had kept for 2 years, a secret that was about to become very, very public. As night fell, Pinnacle's executives believed they were preparing for a standard PR crisis. By morning, they would discover they were fighting for the very survival of their company. And Richard Blackstone, who had dismissed Marcus Washington as some rich guy playing the race card, was about to learn the true cost of underestimating the wrong person. The next morning, Marcus Washington stood before a forest of microphones at Washington Dynamics headquarters. Camera flashes illuminated his face as he prepared to deliver the announcement that would send Pinnacle Airlines into free fall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice steady and commanding, "yesterday my daughter was subjected to racial discrimination by Pinnacle Airlines. But this isn't just about one incident or one family. This is about a pattern of systematic racism that has been allowed to fester within this company for years." The room fell silent as Marcus presented the evidence his team had compiled. Internal documents showing the cover-up of discrimination complaints, social media posts revealing the racist attitudes of employees, and statistics demonstrating the disproportionate treatment of minority passengers. But then came the bombshell. As of this morning, Washington Dynamics and our affiliated investment funds control 31% of Pinnacle Airlines' outstanding stock, making us the company's largest shareholder. We have been quietly acquiring these shares over the past 2 years, and yesterday's incident has convinced us that dramatic change is necessary. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and on the screens behind Marcus, Pinnacle's stock price began plummeting in real time as the news spread. If you believe in poetic justice, this is your moment. Type "justice" in the comments if you're feeling the satisfaction of seeing accountability in action. Marcus continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Effective immediately, we are calling for the resignation of CEO Richard Blackstone and the entire senior management team. We are demanding a complete overhaul of the company's anti-discrimination policies and the implementation of an independent oversight board to monitor compliance." He paused, letting the magnitude of his words sink in. "And we are filing a federal lawsuit seeking damages not just for my daughter, but for every passenger who has been victimized by this airline's discriminatory practices." The revelation of Marcus Washington's ownership stake sent shockwaves through Wall Street and the aviation industry. Pinnacle's stock price collapsed by 40% in the first hour of trading, wiping out billions in market value. Other major shareholders, including pension funds and institutional investors, began demanding answers about the discrimination scandal and the company's failure to disclose Washington's growing ownership position. Within hours, the Department of Transportation announced a comprehensive investigation into Pinnacle's practices, while the Department of Justice opened a civil rights inquiry. Congressional leaders called for hearings, and aviation regulators in Europe and Asia began reviewing their own relationships with the airline. But the most devastating blow came from Pinnacle's own employees. Flight attendants, pilots, and ground crew members who had witnessed discrimination but remained silent out of fear for their jobs began coming forward with their own stories. The airline's employee union, facing pressure from its diverse membership, withdrew its support for management and called for new leadership. Was Marcus Washington's response appropriate? Some would say he went too far, that using his financial power to take over a company over one incident of discrimination was excessive. Others would argue that systemic problems require systemic solutions. What do you think? Is this justice or revenge? Comment below with your perspective. Richard Blackstone, who had dismissed Marcus Washington as some rich guy playing the race card just 24 hours earlier, now found himself fighting for his professional survival. Emergency board meetings were called, crisis management firms were hired, and desperate attempts were made to contain the damage. But it was too late. The trap had been sprung and there was no escape. 3 weeks after Zara Washington's humiliating experience on Flight 847, Pinnacle Airlines announced the resignation of CEO Richard Blackstone and 5 other senior executives. The company agreed to pay a record-breaking $500 million settlement to resolve federal civil rights violations, with a significant portion of the funds going to establish a foundation dedicated to combating discrimination in the travel industry. Patricia Kellerman and Kevin Morrison were terminated and faced federal charges for violating passengers' civil rights. The FBI's investigation revealed that they were part of a network of airline employees who had been systematically targeting minority passengers, sharing information and coordinating their discriminatory actions across multiple flights and airports. But the most significant change came in Pinnacle's boardroom. Marcus Washington was elected chairman of the board, and his first act was to appoint a new CEO, Dr. Keisha Thompson, a former Department of Transportation official and one of the most respected black executives in the aviation industry. Under new leadership, Pinnacle Airlines became a model for diversity and inclusion in the industry. The company implemented comprehensive anti-bias training for all employees, established an independent civil rights office to investigate complaints, and created pathways for minority advancement throughout the organization. The transformation was complete. A moment of discrimination had led to a revolution in corporate accountability. 6 months later, Zara Washington boarded another Pinnacle Airlines flight, this time as a member of the company's board of directors, a position she accepted after completing her MBA. As she settled into her first-class seat, she reflected on how a moment of humiliation had transformed into an opportunity for systemic change. The flight attendant who greeted her was Destiny Johnson, a young black woman who had been promoted to senior flight attendant as part of the airline's new diversity initiatives. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Washington," Destiny said with a genuine smile. "We're honored to have you flying with us today." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Zara thought about the hundreds of passengers who would never again face the discrimination she had experienced. The price of that change had been steep: careers destroyed, fortunes lost, reputations ruined. But sometimes, she reflected, justice required more than just individual accountability. Sometimes it required tearing down the entire system and building something better in its place. If you've made it this far in the video, you're one of the real ones. Hit subscribe right now and comment "real one," so I know who stayed until the end. The Washington story teaches us something profound about power and accountability in America. When discrimination happens to most people, their options are limited. They might file a complaint that goes nowhere. They might share their story on social media and hope for attention. They might simply swallow the hurt and move on. But Marcus Washington had something most victims of discrimination don't have: the power to fight back on equal terms. The resources to investigate, litigate, and ultimately transform the very company that had wronged his daughter. Is this a story about justice? Or is it a story about privilege? The privilege of having the means to demand accountability when others cannot? Perhaps it's both. The plane lifted off into the clear blue sky, carrying its passengers toward their destinations with dignity and respect, exactly as it should be. And in the first-class cabin, Zara Washington smiled, knowing that her father's lesson had been learned by an entire industry. Actions have consequences, and those who choose discrimination will face the full weight of justice. The Washington name would be remembered not just for building a business empire, but for using that power to ensure that no other young person would endure what Zara had experienced on that fateful day. In the end, that legacy was worth more than any amount of money. It was the true measure of success in America, where justice delayed is not justice denied, but justice that arrives with compound interest. We live in a world where discrimination still exists in every industry, every institution, every corner of society. Most of us lack the resources to fight back the way Marcus Washington did. But his story reminds us that change is possible, that systems can be transformed when enough pressure is applied at the right points. The question for all of us is, how do we create that pressure when we don't have billions of dollars or corporate ownership stakes? How do we hold power accountable when we ourselves lack power? Perhaps the answer lies in collective action, in standing together, in refusing to accept discrimination as inevitable. Because while not everyone can be Marcus Washington, everyone deserves the justice he secured for his daughter. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of racism, resistance, and redemption. Together we can make a difference.